Constructive Criticism is sponsored by Oasis Games. MTGOasis.com is the place to get cards for your next Magic event. Try them out with code CCMTG for 15% off of your first order, and use the code Would That Be Good for 4% off of every order. Want to support the show directly? Head on over to patreon.com/CCMTG to check out some awesome benefits and future goals for the show. Thanks for listening, and here's this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Constructive Criticism. This is episode 295, and I never thought I'd get here. 5 episodes before episode 300, a mark that if you had asked me on episode 10 if I thought we'd get here, I'd say no chance. And it wouldn't have been possible without Mason Clark.
How everyone doing tonight?
And Trey McLarnin.
This is the sound of my voice.
I like that you guys have different things than... Michael insisted that other people say certain things, and you guys are like, no, we pave our own way, our own path. I like it.
I have no self-doubt. I can't be judged by people who are rest in peace WotC staff.
Oh man, getting all meta before the topic is even announced this week. We are talking about self-doubt. Mason should have some because, let's be honest, he ain't no Michael Hinderrocker. No, I'm just kidding.
Sounds like Hinderrocker should have some self-doubt. He ain't no Mason.
Oh! But before we get there, let's talk about the point of the show. If you're not a Michael Hinderrocker now, you always can be, because you can be always improving. You can get better today than you were yesterday. And when you do that, it's part of that concept, right? That always improving mindset. That means that you can get better. You can try to get better. And as you actively pursue it, it'll probably happen for you because, you know, other people just aren't doing it that way. And when you are and they aren't, it becomes a lot easier for you. This week was really interesting for me because most of my improving has been in my personal life. I got really sick this week, actually. I was sick probably 4 of the last 7 days. So it was really rough for me at work, as, you know, I was leaving work and having to work from home and, you know, playing way too much Fire Emblem because I couldn't fall asleep. But one of the things that I did get the chance to do is kind of talk about Modern with Matt, watch Matt play some Modern games, play some draft myself. And I think one of the things that I saw on Twitter this week that really resonated with me in Magic is people can care a lot about what other people think of them and what their accomplishments mean to other people. And as I thought about my role on this podcast and my, you know, future in Magic and kind of how things have to go as my job changes over the next 6 months and my home life changes, and you know, it's really important to me to realize that, you know, the things that you're doing in Magic are up to you. You know, the things that you're doing to improve, the things that you're doing to learn, you know, it's up to you what your goals are and what your priorities are. And I think that's really important at different parts in your Magic life. And we have to reassess those things pretty often. And I don't know if it was last week or the week before where I talked about that pretty significantly, but it was kind of reaffirmed this week as I know my job is changing. You know, I have a promotion coming up. I have things that are happening before my promotion because they know my promotion is happening or my job is changing. And kind of realizing, like, I still have room for Magic in this capacity to help players in this way and to understand what my priorities are has been really big for me this week. So that's kind of sappy and different, but I hope that everybody can have those moments where they can evaluate where they're going to improve and where they want to improve and kind of go from there.
Awesome. Trey, what about you?
Well, you know, it's a thing that we've talked about a lot, where we talk about the things that you can learn from Magic and how those things can apply to life. This is an example of something where I think it's also the opposite is true, where things you can learn from other things that are going on that aren't Magic related, and then how you can apply those to the Magic game and how you can improve in that way. And what I would like to talk about in that regard is the Tennessee Titans, which specifically, for those of you who aren't sports fans, is that it was a situation where there was talk all leading up to a game this week as the NFL season started, and it was that the Titans should lose and that they were playing a much better team and that there was not respect going for that opponent going into the game, and instead they beat the Browns 43-13 and put an embarrassment on them. Yeah, just let them know, put an embarrassment on them. But it touches on a really important thing, and it touches on a really important thing that also was something I had to work on in my Magic game at a pretty critical point, which is respecting your opponent. Even if you're dealing with someone who you think may not be at a skill level that is where you are, or an experience level of where you are, if you don't give proper respect to your opponent, you're going to get embarrassed, like the Cleveland Browns, and nobody wants that.
To be fair, because I was going to introduce this podcast as like three people who are really happy about their teams having 30-point wins, but I actually think that I would have learned something else from the Cleveland Browns Titans game for Magic specifically, because I think that pretty often you can get caught up in having. I think we actually see this a lot in Magic, where all the pieces and the components of your deck are at an extremely high level, right? And then you have something like the Cleveland Browns, where it's just this team filled of these very high level players, and then you have the Tennessee Titans, which when you think about like defense in football, it's very similar to like having a cohesive game plan overall in a game of Magic. And Mason's laughing right now, but I'm like completely serious. Like the Tennessee Titans, I think, have had a great defense for like 3 years now, and while combining that with the playmaking ability of something, it's kind of the equivalent to like having a deck that has a cohesive game plan and then a finisher like Elspeth in your deck. Or if you think about 6-mana Elspeth and kind of the way those decks play, I often attribute football to my always improving moments and like learn what I can from paying. You talk about paying respect to an opponent, but at the same time, like I think that understanding that you have a down year like the Tennessee Titans, it's the same thing as coming back from a match of Magic. Like sometimes things aren't going to go your way, but that doesn't decrease the fact that you're a capable team and a capable player.
Yeah.
If you're from Cleveland, what was it like just having the last 4 minutes be dumped on? I just want to know. Tweet at.
The Cleveland Browns have only been an above average football team for 10 weeks in the last 20 years statistically. So I promise you, if you're from Cleveland and you're a Cleveland Browns fan, you have no problem accepting these facts.
Yeah,
You've been miserable outside of your Cleveland championship in basketball for 20 years, and we understand and we empathize with you and we apologize. Mason, what about you? How did you improve at Magic?
Yeah, but you can lick your wounds at the Linking Lizard.
The football talk. This week I played a lot of Legacy to practice for SCG Philly, Magic the Gathering. I 2 to 3 weeks ago on the podcast, we talked about how we all had something we want to work on and we wanted to improve. Mm-hmm. And one of my things that I said I really wanted to work on and get back to was playing a lot of meaningful games of Magic and practicing, because I used to have a really good work ethic and I kind of let it slip. And I played a bunch of games for SCG Philly, played a lot of teamer decks, switched up a lot of cards, tried a lot of stuff, and I was really happy with my process.
Yeah. It sounds like you really adopted the Patriot way there, Mason, and we can all understand that.
The only thing they know how to practice is losing to the Titans by 30 points. All right.
No, I actually have a question. How did you have those meaningful games before we move on to our Patreon question?
Well, I made sure to like focus in on the game, like just have some like light, Taylor Swift music in the background to focus, but like not play with other people. Like it does help actually. Like I find that if I play in quiet, it actually weirdly doesn't imitate the Magic experience. Where like when you play at a Magic tournament, there is like some rustle and bustle going on.
Sure.
So you just put music that low on, like that way you have some background, but I can still focus. It's kind of like I was in an event, I would hear people talking. And then when it came to that, I tried things like played Hex Drinker, played without Hex Drinker, played with a couple, played Vapor Snag in my main deck, in a league with that, and then tried playing different sideboard stuff, just that kind of thing. And then also just looking at what I want to potentially have in my sideboard, where I want to pick my battles going into Eldraine, assuming there's nothing that like super changes the format. Maybe once upon a time makes some new decks happen, but as of right now, not looking like there's too much that's going to affect Legacy. So it's kind of what I'm working with. I'm actually super hopeful Eldraine does not shake up Legacy a lot, because I need to focus on Standard as soon as like Eldraine hits Arena, which means no more Legacy for like a week and a half.
Dude,
yeah, but I think that it's likely. I mean, it's very hard for a set to shake up Legacy in a general way.
You would say that, except I was gonna say except for like War of the Spark and Modern Horizons and
M20.
Yeah, M20
Elder
helped.
Protector is like made all like the lands deck better as like.
It didn't. I don't think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It's insane.
Yeah. So while not maybe craziness like shake up there, like I am hopeful that like I can put in the time now so that when it hits, I can help my Standard player out. and we can put the time in for her deck. So
Yeah, you just gave me an idea, Mason, for a monetization idea for the podcast. You have to tell me. You have to remind me about later. But before we talk about monetizing, let's talk about our Patreon at patreon.com/ccmtg. It is the way to monetize this podcast if you're a fan of it. You go to patreon.com/ccmtg. I'm a patron of any level to get access to our Patreon question every week. Special shout out to those who are on our Constructed Critics group. You become a patron of $5 or more, you get access to our sideboard guides, our deck lists, everything that comes with being a part of the Facebook group, the Constructed Critics. One of our questions comes this week from one of our Constructed Critics. If you're a patron of any level, you get access to this question. And Adrian asks, can you all explain your process for new standard? Like, do you have a page of relevant standard cards, or do you just look at new cards and push them as far as you can? And this is a really interesting question because as somebody who's done Pro Tour testing for, I don't know, 7 standards, brand new standards, or what feels like that at this point, I actually did both of these things, and I'm excited to talk about them. Do you guys want to go first? Do you want me to kind of lead the way?
I'm interested to hear what Trey has to say about this, because I think I kind of know where you're going, but I am curious with Trey, because I find that normally, like, the discussion gets led by, like, one of us sharing cards locally, but I don't know if he has something that he does behind the scenes I don't know about,
Sure.
like a little black book.
Yeah, I mean, we always end up talking about the new cards and everything else, but I think one of the key things to always keep in mind when looking at a standard, when there's a set that's being added or rotation and everything else, everyone always gets so focused and so excited on what new decks can be built, because that's the fun part, right? That's the exciting part. But something that should always be kept in mind and something that you should be looking at is that what archetypes are going to be surviving, whatever it is that's coming up if there's a rotation, or what archetypes were dominant prior to the set being added if there's not a rotation. And then looking to see what new pieces are coming in that can enhance or add to those decks that are already existing. Because odds are, probably early on in a format, if you can enhance or add on to an established deck that was already tuned leading in, you're going to be in a better position than you're going to be with something new that you're building from scratch. And so I think that that's a good starting point when you're looking at what it is that's going on. And it's a part that I think gets overlooked by a lot of people when they start talking about looking at a new format, because it's the less sexy part. It's the less exciting part, right? Like figuring out what new brews are there, figuring out what new decks are there is the part that gets everybody fired up, which I understand. But I think that that's an important thing to look at when you're looking at like what you could be doing from a competitive standpoint in a new format. Also, I tend to look for proactive decks in a new format versus control decks, because things aren't really settled or figured out yet, and it's going to be hard to really kind of set the ground as to what's going on.
How do you do that with, like, so like you talked about building upon old decks, but when a standard rotation like this happens, there aren't many things that survive, right?
Right. Well, so that happens a lot of the times, but not every time, right? Like there are decks that have a lot of pieces that are still there, like core pieces that are there, right? Like, so look and see, there will be rotations that are card rotating out, but like, are there core engine pieces that are there, or core parts of a deck that are there? And then can you build in new directions on that? Like we were just talking about it actually right before the podcast started. We were talking about mono red. And you were like, I thought there weren't good mono red creatures. And it's like, no, there's just so many good mono red creatures that there's good mono red creatures you don't think about that are around that don't get played because there's better ones that are going to rotate out, right? But that doesn't mean that the ones that are there aren't viable, right? So it's like, what pieces are there for archetypes that are going to continue, even though, there are like the cards that have all been kind of generally assumed are rotating out. There might be core pieces that are still going to be there that aren't rotating.
Yeah. Awesome. Spencer, you?
It's funny. I'm kind of going back through. While he was talking, I thought about two things. One, how right Trey is on these. We talked about the mono red thing, and you even think about like, if we look at deck lists right now in mono red that people are getting mythic with today, they have Scorch Spitter in them over Fanatical Firebrand. A lot of the times, it is the de facto better one drop for a lot of people, and that wasn't true when the card came out. People just didn't adopt that. It actually took a while for that to happen. As Standard gets bigger and bigger, it gets harder to innovate and for the innovations to see more pieces. And as Standard gets smaller with a rotation, finding the best versions of a piece become a lot more important because you don't have the backs of other people to work on. And I think one of the things that, this team doesn't exist anymore because, Danny doesn't play Magic, Michael's at Wizard of the Coast. I'm a dad now. Casey quit Magic, but Team Constructed Criticism had the best performing deck list, and I think something like 4 or 5 Pro Tours in a row. And I think a lot of the reason that we were able to do that is because we had a good process of, first of all, we had Michael, who's just, insane at picking decks, but also, people getting together and breaking things down. And I think that, Adrian here asks, did you look at relevant cards in Standard, and then did you push them as far? And I think the thing is true of both. I think I can't remember how many times we talked about a card that was insane in Pro Tour testing that ended up being, one of the best decks in Standard for a while on this podcast. And whether it was Glint Sleeve Siphoner being something that was insane, whether it was what was the 1-mana artifact with haste that you put things under and could
Bomat Courier.
Yeah, Bomat Courier, or the Vehicles decks. Obviously, I won states with a version of our Teamer, our Aetherworks Marvel deck, right? That they played at the Pro Tour, and we even had innovation for the mirror. So we had a better mirror match than Team Channel Fireball at that Pro Tour. So I think one of the things that this is something that I've been good at, and something that I think that having a group of people that you trust around you is actually the most important thing, because if I think of the success that I've had playing Magic, this is one of those areas. It's, let's take the cards that we love, let's push them, and then, as Trey said, let's also put them in other archetypes that we already enjoyed and that we already thought were good.
Well, let me ask you this from a mechanical standpoint, because I know that you've said that you've had success with this, but what pieces of information can you point to of how to help Adrian reach that level of success as well, right? How can we kind of articulate that?
Yeah.
Of how do we go about getting to that point of success?
Yeah, I think should we take it to a specific example?
Yeah.
Okay, so can we go with Farseek Jund from Return to Ravnica Standard is a really good example of this, where our group of friends identified Farseek into Huntmaster of the Fells as one of the best plays you could do, as we were actually testing for a state championship and another tournament before the set came out. And we realized that because you're playing Farseek, you have better 3 mana. So it's taking steps, right? You realize that Farseek into Huntmaster is a really good play. You then push that thing, right? And then once you've done that with Shocklands, Farseek, Huntmaster of the Fells, you realize, okay, well, what's the other thing that I can do with my ramp? And you're okay, well, Thragtusk is an insane card that was just printed. And it's all right, well, if we're already pushing our mana, we want to hit all of our land drops, here's something, so let's try Rakdos' Return, right? And you kind of start to build those things off of the blocks that you think are already good. First of all, those things only happen through a lot of Magic played. And you can only play a lot of Magic to get the sample size you need by having a group of people around you that are also playing a lot of Magic, and that you can bounce things off of. That doesn't have to be your direct playtesting partners. Maybe you're in an awesome Discord. Maybe you're in an awesome Facebook group. Maybe you're in a clan on MTGO, or a group of people in different ways. Sure.
MTGO clan.
Yeah. All
right, sorry, keep going.
Sorry. That's a good point. That was a bad example. But my point is I think that a lot of the things that happen in attacking a format early is actually through a group think tank at this point. And I think that one of the reasons that CCMTG testing team started to be all right, we don't need this anymore, is because the good players kept doing really good, and we realized that a lot of that had to do with because we could take information from different sources, and because we could just keep talking to each other anyway, and you didn't need this unified testing team that got in the house. I mean, it was really helpful for Pro Tours, but the most helpful thing was having a group of people you're surrounding yourself with. And I think that if I were to have a perfect state for something like the Constructed Critics group on Facebook, it would be a group of players that are trying to get better and actually doing this together. And I think that, Adrian, you could be a huge part of that, and I think others could too, where it's pretty easy to have a think tank of even just 20 people, figure out interesting things, try them, and then kind of iterate. And I think that's going to be the most helpful thing for Adrian. Trey?
What about you, Mason?
I would say I agree with a lot of what was been said, right? I think you need to look back at other stuff. I think the thing that I would add to this that hasn't been said, so don't think this is a huge part, this is just something we haven't mentioned, is I try to think about cards in the new context of the format and how the cards might play out differently. So an example might be, normally I don't think a card like Once Upon a Time would see play in a mid-range deck, right? If you don't know Once Upon a Time, it's 1 green, and you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and add a land or a creature to your hand, and then if it's the first spell you would cast this game, you can play it for free. I don't really care about that part. What I care about is the look at the top 5 part. And normally I don't think that'd be something like my mid-range deck or maybe even my standard deck would really want if it wasn't putting it in the graveyard. But I was thinking about the new Hero's Downfall today, and I was like, oh, the new Hero's Downfall is a creature as well because of the adventuring thing. So this card actually lets me find spells, where before you might have a little bit of tension there, right? Not being able to put too many spells in your deck. But now, if you find the right cards, you can do this. So while I don't think that interaction is worth putting in a deck, I now like have thought about that context of the card, and my frame of mind is like, okay, if there are enough of these, maybe this is something I can do, and it lets you do a little bit of legwork as cards are coming out, trying to think about how they fit in the context and also how they're different. I think one thing that Brad Nelson, he said back during the Kaladesh pre-release at PAX that has really stuck with me is I can make any card sound really bad. Like I can sit there and I can make the card sound terrible. It's a lot better to try and look at what the positives are in the card and try and focus on what you can do to make the card good, because there might not be much, but there might be a whole lot. And while it might not seem as good as something else, the format's changing and it adapts too, right? Like I think an example of this might be right now, Feather is about to lose some of the really important cards as we know the deck, right? You're going to lose it down to Vanguard. That's a really powerful 2-drop. We're going to lose Reckless Rage. It's a really strong removal spell for the deck. But maybe something like Domri's Ambush is a card that can fill that kind of role in that deck. And maybe something like Tithe Taker might not be the best 2-drop in the world, but maybe you want something like that. So it gives you like a different aspect to the deck. So trying to think about what you can do and not just being like, deck's dead because we don't have a Danto Rage. Instead, think of it like, what can I do to fill those holes, and how can I think about this deck differently? And if I think Feather is strong, should I be thinking about Feather just in a different light, right? Maybe it's not this mid-range deck anymore. Maybe now it's a more go face never trade deck, and it attacks a bunch. So
yeah, I think that something that like I've already thought about since spoilers have come out and like thinking about rotating decks is like, I mean, I've already texted Mason about like working on 5-color Golos gates, right? Like, yeah, we've already like started. I mean, very small text conversations about that, but like I've already texted somebody about Gruul. I've already texted somebody about Teferi decks. Like understanding like these are understanding things that are going to be pillars of the format no matter what. Like Field of the Dead has proven that it doesn't need Scape Shift, and Gates has proven that it's already been a tier 1 deck for weeks at a time. Tier 2 deck for a lot of, and tier don't play this for a lot of the time too. But once Nexus of Fate rotates, right, it's like, well, what's the reason not to play Gates? And
yeah, it's something that we don't know right now, but we know going into the spoilers that that's what we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Because what we know right now is there's no reason. It looks like Gates is the most over the top thing you can do. So now you're looking like, okay, I need to keep my eyes out on what would make me not want to play Gates. What might be an aggressor? Like, what are the red decks going to do, and how can I plan for that?
Trey, what were you going to say?
There's one thing that I think plays into what it is that Mason was saying that I kind of want to try to articulate a little bit differently, which is that having a recognition when you're looking at cards and you're evaluating new cards, that these cards were not just selected at random. These cards were designed, and they were designed to work together with other cards in the set, right? So when you have a card like Once Upon a Time, and like Mason was talking about, like previously Grizzly Salvage wouldn't get spells, right? Which this new card is basically Grizzly Salvage that's sometimes free. And but now they have these new designs, right? And so now I can get other things. And so evaluating it, like trying to evaluate this card in the context of the set in which you're seeing it in. And sometimes you'll find a deck that way, and sometimes you can find like, okay, these are the cards that seem are supposed to be together, but it's not all there yet. So maybe there's going to be pieces in a future set that are coming. But like that's kind of how we came across the Gates deck when we were putting it together in the first place. Is like, okay, well, they have these Gates cards, they designed them to be played together. Is there a deck? Let's put the pieces together and see whether or not there's something that's there. And there ended up being something there at that point, but like you can start with looking for synergies there because they designed synergies into the set. Like they built these cards to work together. Man. And there might be things that they missed. They might be things that aren't there, or they might have things that aren't powerful enough to look at. But like that's a good place to start getting an idea of what the cards are.
Mason, it's really funny hearing this story from kind of both sides here, where like to me the Gates deck was an evolution of the Temur Hydroid Crisis ramp deck that we were working on. But also, I knew that your friends had talked to you about the Gate side. I mean, like I remember the text you sent me that was like, "Hey, I really like this Temur deck, but what if we play Gates for Gates Ablaze?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" But also, like, what? Like, I remember the first time that we played the deck together, I was like, "Oh yeah, this fixes all the problems." It's really funny to like, and I think that. barring Seth Manfield and John Stern, like there's nobody on the history of this podcast that you should listen to as like the definitive experts onto like how you should do things in Magic. Like most of what we give you is just our experiences and like what you can learn from us. But I also think that like all of us, we've had some success in like what we're preaching and why we're preaching it, and we wouldn't give you this advice without that experience. So
yeah, I'm not going to talk for the sake of talking. I can do that without recording the podcast.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything you guys want to else add for Adrian here other than that?
I would say that if you're trying to play an event, like let's say you're trying to play the week 1 Star City Games, event going on, or maybe the first maybe even MC, I guess PTQ. I guess they're officially PTQs now. You're trying to play a PTQ, the week 1. I think playing something that is reasonable and you're able to get some games and refined is important. So
did they just announce that all SCGs are PTQs now?
No, I'm saying like that has not been announced. But what I was saying is that they are off MCQs. Like you now play.
You went from talking about SCGs to PTQs.
Yeah, I was saying. Yeah,
sorry, I got lost there. No, it's totally my bad.
Be an invite, but we don't know if it's a win or not. And it's probably the 2020 season if that were to happen. So we don't know.
Okay.
But either way, yes, I would say try to get some amount of games in. Luckily, thanks to Arena, the stuff comes out online, and it's much easier to get games.
Yeah.
So try and do that. So
I also think the early streamer events, like if you look at like the last standard, right? Like we saw Gate Shift, we saw Temur Elementals, we saw I guess there were some other decks that didn't last as long, but we saw Feather, stuff like that. Like the early streamer events have actually come up with like pretty big contributors to the metagame the last 2 streamer events.
Yeah, I think I think what's really happened is it's drawing more attention sooner, and we have more people now too. So I think it's a combination of that, right? Like getting the cards earlier, plus like we're also like I have played a couple of the streamer events. You're like incentivized to like try and do cooler and crazier stuff, and that like sparks more ideas and like gets you going, right? Like I wouldn't normally try to play a goblin, deck or whatever, but like if goblins had been good, I would have started there. So also helps you roll out things quicker. So
yeah, so stay tuned. Hopefully Mason and I can be a part of the next streamer event, but I think that's another good way to help you out. Take it away, Trey.
Hello, fellow Magic competitor. If you're like me, and I think you are, you have been nuzzled up safely in your straw house with your little pork-field friends gleefully devouring the tales that are slowly leaking about the fairy-filled plain of Eldraine. Once upon a time, our hearth was stoked with the legendary Embercleave itself. We were safe. We were happy. We were with friends, and there is nothing that could go wrong. Our serene screening of the Eldraine spoilers was not to last, however. We were beset by the witch's vengeance, but it could not penetrate our walls. We never would have known that what followed would be much worse. Next came the howling, the terrible howling, the relentless and wicked howling. We thought to run for our enchanted carriage, but knew we would never make it. As Tolsimer reminds us, even wicked wolves have friends. We felt safe behind our walls. What a dim view we had of the power of the wild. Little did we know our doom was foretold. And as the pack of wicked wolves huffed and puffed, they blew our house down. It was a slaughter. I was made to watch as my 3 little piggy friends were assaulted. I was left alone only on the order to share this tale with others. And my dear friends, that's where barbecue came from. And if you would like to know more about this and other stories about the Plain of Eldraine, then head over to the good people at Oasis Games, mtgoasis.com, and use code CCMTG for 15% off your first order, or you can use code Would That Be Good for 4% off every order.
Trey, while I really love that ad, did you see my tweet before you wrote that ad?
No.
Oh, man. I love my co-host so much. I literally was tweeting how that card was like just chef's kiss of flavor on a card, which you can get 4 of at Oasis Games if you need a falter next week. So today our training grounds is on overcoming self-doubt. The training grounds is something that every week we want to talk about something that's going to make you better at Magic or life in general, and I think this is one of those topics that can really help in both aspects, and I'm really excited to talk about it. So before we kind of get into like what can self-doubt do to your Magic game, I want to talk about something personal. So for those who don't know, recently my job has changed a lot. About a year and a half ago, I moved departments, I got a new boss, and there was a lot of self-doubt when I was hired because I was hired as a recruit referred to from my brother. And I've been suffering a lot from imposter syndrome, and it was funny because I was starting to suffer from imposter syndrome in Magic at the same time I got my job, and it kind of escalated itself. But recently, in both Magic and in life, I've been able to kind of overcome some of that and understand like what my limitations are, what I'm working on, what my goals are. And I think that this episode, I hope, will kind of help people in Magic specifically. But if you can apply these lessons outside of that, I know that I have, and I kind of just wanted to share that kind of before we get into it. But I'd like to lead this. Originally we had Trey leading this part of the topic, but I want to talk about the kind of self-doubt that you can have in your Magic game. And Trey, I'd like to go first if that's okay, really quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that for me, a lot of my self-doubt in Magic has come from allowing external factors to get into my head, whether it's something somebody says, whether it's, my results being posted somewhere or a deck list being posted somewhere. I've often let self-doubt creep in from external factors, which is something that I would think that I would be good at avoiding, but it has meant a lot to me over my time in Magic, and I think that for me, that affects me on a micro scale a lot of the times when you think about whether you're streaming or recording a video or playing a feature match. I mean, myself, I think I'm 0-3 in camera feature matches. And that is certainly not representative of my Magic the Gathering win percentage, but
it's much higher than 0.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't even be hard for that to happen. But
it'd be actually impressive if it was.
But I think it's really easy, and maybe it's just who I am as a person. But I've often let those small things impact me, and let external factors specifically impact me. What about you, Mason? What are the things that have impacted you?
Yeah, I think one of the things to note about this when it comes to like talking about self-doubt in Magic is that it can manifest in lots of different ways, right? So it can like manifest in like, your friends saying something about your deck, right? Or it can manifest in like for me, like there's a lot of self-doubt and anxiety when it comes to like picking exact card slots and stuff with like, the week leading up to a tournament, right? It can be like very anxiety inducing and create a lot of internal struggle. I know for some people, like self-doubt, it comes from seeing others succeed. Like they'll see a friend do really well in a Magic tournament, and that makes them call into question themselves, like, why haven't I been able to do this? Or why can't I do what they do? I've been playing less than them. I play more than them, or less, more. I've been playing longer. I play more Magic than they do, blah, blah, blah. And that can manifest itself in a lot of ways. And it's one of those things where, we like to talk about on the show how Magic, things in Magic can relate to life. This is a moment where things in life can relate to Magic a lot, right? Self-doubt manifests itself in lots of ways in modern society. We look at people having issues with social media addiction, right? And looking at others and judging themselves upon that. And we see that happen in Magic all the time. We see it like you see someone else succeeding and you feel bad about it. Like that is just a common one that I see a lot of my friends have. And that's why I keep bringing it up. But it's something that can be very hard. I know that when I got my top 4 at the SCG, some people like used it as like they used the fact that it was a team event as a way to discredit, which is interesting when you really think about it, because everyone says team events are so hard, but then if you do well at a team tournament, it was a team tournament, so it didn't matter. And it's funny because it's like, well, that's not my experience. Also, like I know my friends who have like won Grand Prix playing team events have had that happen to them. I know a couple people that way, and it's like, oh, like this is just a thing that happens. And when you think of it like that, it's actually kind of liberating, right? Because it just shows that like, oh, some people are just going to always try to put you down regardless. And it doesn't really matter what those kind of people are saying. What matters is like the self-dialogue and are you happy with your results?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think that's like super big.
Yeah. I think that what you touched on there is so big. I know that people actually text me about Mason's top 4, and they're like, yeah, but it was a team event. And I was like, it was funny because before, I don't remember if it was right before or right after, but like I mean, it was right before where Matt Kelly and I were texting each other about Mason and just being like, this dude is putting in so much work. Like, something is going to happen for this guy. We just had a Utah player win a PTQ in Vegas. She had been working for so long. She's supposed to be my guest on Arena Mythicast soon, but I think it's so easy for people to put people into boxes that they make to make themselves feel better. When I qualified for the Pro Tour with Teamer, people said Spencer can only play mid-range decks. When I won three PPTQs in a row locally, people said Spencer can only play control decks. It's like, and then we have Mason calling me Snake Guy, can only do well with Snake decks. I'm just kidding. But I think that something that happens is people like to put you into the box that makes them feel better. And like I said, I've been bad in the past at this. I personally have struggled with allowing this to happen. I mean, as recently as GP Denver, I was texting. I don't know, Mason, did I text you about the Scapeshift deck like before the event started?
You were texting me about not wanting to play Teamer and instead playing a Scapeshift deck, but you didn't tell me the deck.
Yeah,
you were just like, I kind of want to play a different deck.
Yeah. So here's what happened. Is I was pretty sure that Teamer wasn't the best. It was the deck that I had the most time with, and I wanted to play a Scapeshift deck. But what I didn't want to happen is for me to day 2 a Grand Prix and cash in, and then people just say, Spencer only does well with Scapeshift decks now. And I let that impact me on a personal level. And it was funny because I register Teamer, right? And then Caroline tells me what she's playing, and I literally say, I see that what she plays on Twitter, and I tell her, I'm like, you're playing the speedest deck in the room. I wish that I would have registered this. And then obviously the tournament takes down the tournament, and it's just the perfect example of when you let external things creep into self-doubt for you, where it's I want to play Scapeshift because I know how to play these decks, and it's a weakness of mine. But the truth is that I should recognize when Scapeshift is a good choice in any given format, or when a ramp deck is a good choice in any format, because I've played ramp 1,000 times, and I should lean on that as a strength and not let it be a self-doubt for me. The same thing is true of snake decks, right? If Lotus Cobra or Winding Constrictor is good, I should let that be strength for me. If Torrential Gearhulk and Teferi are good, I should let that be strength for me. If Dredge is good, Trey should let that be strength for him.
Let's not let's not get out of control.
I'm just saying, it's so easy to worry about what other people are going to say about what your results are, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the results that you have.
Yeah, and can I comment on this a little bit? 'Cause
yeah.
I think I have a unique perspective when it comes to this too. So I used to play another game very competitively called Cardfight Vanguard. And my career for Cardfight Vanguard is over, right? I'm not going to ever play that game again at a competitive level like I did at one time. And when I look back on it, I'm very happy with my results. My team, we were dominant, we crushed, we did very well, and I'm very happy with it. And I didn't allow those things to affect me. And I would get comments like that, Mason only knows how to play Kagura, Mason only knows how to play Angel Feather, which are pretend it's red and blue. It's I can only play certain colors, right? And it's well, no, these are just what I think is right, and I'm going to play them. And then I would if green became really good, I would play green in an event and crush. And I allowed for myself to not switch just because of those things or allow those things to affect me. I just play whatever I thought was the best. And also looking back on my thing, I feel great about it. I have no remorse, no history, or anything like that. And eventually one day, everyone listening to this podcast, unless Magic literally never dies and you play it until you die, will have that moment with Magic where maybe you'll quit for a while and you'll look back on it. And what matters more, I promise you, it doesn't matter if you top 8'd an SCG. It doesn't matter if you won, or maybe winning a Pro Tour would matter a lot. But, these things don't really matter. What matters more is being happy with how you did it, being happy with your results, and making sure that you were happy and that you put the work in, right? Were you happy with the time you dedicated? Are you happy with your process? Are you happy with how things went? And if you can look back and be happy, I promise you that's going to matter more, because I have that for another game. So I know when I came into Magic and I think back on it, it's I know these are things that matter because I've seen it matter to me more before. So it's something I just wanted to mention. So, and it definitely helps if you do well, by the way. If you do well and you look back on things, it's a lot easier to be happy, I imagine. But,
The glory days, you're saying?
Yes, exactly. The good old days. But Trey, you have been kind of quiet. What do you think about all this? Sorry to steal the show there for a second.
Oh, no. You know, if I'm being honest, you know, in this, which I always want to try to do with the listeners and everybody else, I don't deal with self-doubt a lot. I'm generally a pretty confident person in most of the things that I do and most of the things that I engage in.
Does graduating from law school help with that?
No, absolutely not. No, I mean seriously. But I do want to share a story though, because this is not something that just came naturally. This is not something that was instinctual. All of this is intentional, and it becomes from a matter of perspective. And these are things that can be easy to say and difficult to do. But originally, when I had made the decision to go to law school, I was going to law school because there had been some personal things that had happened where there had been some family members who had some things that they'd done in the past that had made me particularly upset and angry, and I was going to law school to do criminal prosecution so that other people didn't have to face and deal with things that I had dealt with in that regard. And it was a decision that I was making out of anger. It was something that I was doing because I was upset about these other things that had happened in my past and whatever. It was a thing that I was angry about. And I had a moment when I was in undergrad where I had a conversation with someone who's a good friend of mine. And in that moment, I decided that anger and fear would no longer ever be parts of decisions that I made. And if I was making a decision for no other reason than because I was angry, or if I was making a decision for no other reason because I was afraid, those were not reasons to make those decisions. And so whenever I have those situations come up from that point forward, if it's something that makes me uncomfortable or it makes me nervous or I have an imposter syndrome, if I'm making that decision only because of fear, then that's not a reason for me not to do a thing. And so I'll just do it and then go to the other side. And I've done that so many times at this point in my life that I don't have that feeling very often. But when it comes up, if the only reason that I can spend time thinking about why am I doing this, I'm doing it because I'm scared, or I'm doing this because I'm mad, whatever that happens to be, then that's not going to be what I do, unless I can have alternate reasons or alternate things that I can find from a logical standpoint that are reasons for me to do what's going on. And that has been a life-changing approach to the way that I view things. And then the second part of it touches on a thing that Mason was talking about, which is, and also Spencer, you were talking about, you talked about these external factors that are going on. You can't control any of those things. Like, people are going to say whatever they're going to say. People are going to do whatever it is they're going to do. You don't have any control over those things. But what you can focus on and what you can try to control is how you determine your value, how you determine your identity, and how you determine your worth, right? And it's that if you are doing that internally, intrinsically, as opposed to allowing external factors to define that for you, then that noise becomes exactly that. It becomes noise. And it's not that you don't hear it. It's not that you don't take criticism, or it's not that any of these other kinds of things, but it's that you're not saying anything that's going to affect who I am, because I know who I am from an intrinsic standpoint. And I know what it is that I'm trying to do from an intrinsic standpoint. And whatever those external factors aren't going to change my evaluation of what that is.
I really love what you're saying. And while as much as I'd love to talk about the things that I actually learned from GP Denver, for example, I think you actually have a unique perspective, Trey, because you just mentioned, making these decisions for external factors and then going to one of the most competitive career paths you can possibly have in law school with those external factors as a motivator. How did you overcome that? I mean, you think about law school and you think about the way you have to be in your class to actually get a job once you're done. How did you go from I'm mad at these things to drive me to do these things to being able to compete in such a high pressure situation?
I found other reasons and other motivations for what it is to do. And then, I ended up focusing not on the reason that I was going initially, not the thing that I thought that I was going to do, but other aspects of it. I stayed away from criminal law entirely. I made the decision at that point that I wanted nothing to do with criminal law, whether it was on the prosecution or the defense at all. I focused on civil. When I was in law school, I was specifically focusing on intellectual property. It was like, this is the creation of new things and the laws that are set up in protection of the creation of new things. And that's seemed like a positive thing to me. And so I focused my energies on that. Then when I got through and out of law school, I ended up working in personal injury work and representing people who had been hurt and helping them get what they needed and money that they needed in order to keep their house or whatever, or pay their medical bills. And so instead, I tried to find avenues of what it was that I was doing that had a positive impact, as opposed to doing something because of the aggressive feelings that I had.
Mason, on the Magic side, if we look at your SCG top 4 and these people saying these things about you and questioning you, whether, you didn't let that affect you at all. I think you won something like, 3,000 SCG IQs in a row right after that.
Yeah. And then, also lost playing for top 8 of 2 more SCGs after that.
That's fine, right? But you still put yourself, we talk about that a lot on this podcast, right? Is, putting yourself in the best position you can to succeed. And whether or not you win or lose those win-ins is separate from the fact that you put yourself in a position to have that success on the SCG tour. But, if you look at it on a smaller scale, like, you didn't suddenly let that impact your entire Magic game, right? Because, like, you still went out and was like, all right, this weekend, this is my opportunity. I'm going to do my best at this opportunity. I'm going to do my best at this opportunity. And, like, you can talk crap on yourself that you want for losing those win-ins, but, like, even with the losing those win-ins, your streak was still pretty sweet.
Yeah, for sure. That was actually more of a sick brag than a dagger on myself. I was saying, look at all the things I did. Like, we lost, a bunch of these. But seriously, like, yes, what Spencer's saying is true. And I recently listened to an episode of Mark Maron's podcast, the WTF podcast, and he had Stephen Colbert on. And Stephen made a comment about how everyone thought that he kind of set up his career to, like, end on the Colbert Report just in time for Letterman. And the truth is, it just didn't happen like that. The contract happened to end. It was just a right place, right time thing. And then he said on the podcast, trust me, my inner monologue is harsher to me than you could ever be. And I thought, wow, that's so true, right? Like, these things and you're saying don't really affect me. If I wanted to tear myself down, I could tear myself down. When I'm harsh on myself, I am more harsh on myself than you can ever be.
Yeah.
Right.
I know where it hurts. I know where to punch.
Exactly. I know where to punch. And since I derive my value intrinsically, that is going to affect me more so than this, right? If I decide something matters to me and I cannot achieve that, that matters a lot more than if someone else says, Mason, go win playing a red deck, right? Well, it's like, no, I'm not going to go play the red deck. I don't think I can play it, or like, sure, I can't win with red decks. Okay, well, like, these are just things. So yeah, I think it's very important to figure out what makes you happy, what makes you feel satisfied, and what makes you feel content, and work towards those things. And if people want to get in the way and they want to say, like, you can only play Scapeshift decks, you can only play Dredge, you only do these things, right? And they mean that in a serious way, well, then who cares, right? Like, think about why they're saying those things. Is it to be helpful to you? No. Is it to be hurtful? Probably. Is it to dagger you in, like, a mean way? Maybe. Like, I don't know. Does it really matter at that point if that's the intent?
Well, and also a recognition that if you allow those comments to change what you're doing, if you allow those comments to affect the decisions that you've made, you're just giving those people control of your life.
Oh, yeah.
You're giving those people control over your game. They're giving those people control over your happiness. And what did they do to earn that control over you? And, instead, you have to make those decisions on your own, because in the end, you're the one that's going to have to deal with whatever the consequences of them are, good or bad. Like, if you win and you get the credit. And if you lose and you have to deal with those things. And whoever it is that said whatever it is they said is not going to be there one way or another. And there's another part of it that's been talked about a lot so far on this, talking about self-doubt being triggered by seeing other people that are around you, your peers, having success that you're not having, that you feel that you should be having. There are two things that we've talked about a lot that I think play into that. One is, like, clearly setting and understanding and being honest with yourself about what your goals actually are. Like, if, you see somebody you think's not as good as you, win an SCG, and you're not going to SCGs, you shouldn't feel self-doubt as a result of that, because your goal is not to win SCGs. And just be honest with yourself that that's not your goal, right? Because this is something that happened with me a lot when I was doing creative pursuits, and then I was trying to start getting into filmmaking, other things. I'd see somebody else have something or do something or whatever. I'd be like, man, why are they getting that and I'm not getting that? And then it's like, I had the recognition. It's like, oh, I don't want it. I literally don't want to do what they're doing. Like, I don't want to be having the thing that they're doing, and they were working towards it and I wasn't. And so that's why they have it and I don't, is because they they were pursuing it, and it's a goal I literally don't want to achieve. But having that hard conversation with yourself that's going on will result in you being able to have a better mindset to put you in a better position to do what you're actually trying to do.
I don't even think that conversations need to be that hard, right? So like a really good example of this is like, I think a lot of players on the West Coast, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but like there are so many players out here, including myself at times, that like we kind of dog on SCGs. I mean, I still do it on Classics, and I probably shouldn't, but like, you know, the SCG tour is the B League, and like, you know, it's so funny as
look at the GP top 4, right? That was the thing I thought of. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the thing is that right now the SCG is the best way to play week to week competitive Magic. End of story. It's actually better than Grand Prix at this point. And like people were dogging on SCGs for years and years because they weren't in their area. And you know, it was really easy for a lot of us, right? Like especially for me, like who played in, you know, 6 SCG days in a row, and day 2, or you know, cashed, or I guess it was 12 because they were 2 at a time, and cashed all but one of them for a long time. And it was really easy for people like me in the West Coast that were like, whatever, these are easy. People that get to play the East Coast, easy money, right? But you know, the last SCG I played, and I wasn't close to day 2ing. Like the SCGs have gotten harder as Magic players have gotten better, and people on the West Coast just aren't respecting the things that are changing in Magic, and it's easy for us to dog on them because they're not in our area. We don't know what they're like anymore. And I think that, you know, something, Trey, that you said, we could separate into 2 parts, right? It's like, one, I mean, it doesn't even have to be like SCGs or filmmaking. It can be whatever your goal is. Is this my goal? And should I care about the fact that this person is achieving their goal, and I'm not achieving their goal because I don't have that arbitrary goal? And 2, am I putting in the work to do this thing that I seem to care about? And if you care about that thing, go put in the work. Go do it. If you don't, and you don't have the goal and you don't care about the thing, don't let that be as a detractor or a motivator for you. And you can split those things that Trey's talking about into 2 sections. One, do I have the same goals as this? Okay. Because it's fine to question, like, why is this person having success and I'm not? But it's only fine if, like, you're putting yourself into the same conditions as that person, right? Because if somebody is out here trying to do X and I'm trying to do Y, and then I'm comparing myself to them, we have just such drastically different variables, and Magic already presents different variables to us to begin with.
Yeah, and you have to also like be honest about, like, are you actually doing the same thing? Like,
yeah.
For example, let's say I wanted to compare myself to Drake Sasser, right? I know Drake plays the SCG tour. Drake has more SCG points than me. I'm like number 50 or 55 somewhere right now in the year, and he's like number 16. Drake plays every SCG event. Drake does not miss SCG events. Is it reasonable for me to compare myself to anyone that doesn't miss an SCG event? No, it's not, right? Nor would I ever think to do that. But I know people who think like that. They're like, wow, I can't believe that I'm so far down the leaderboard compared to Drake, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you aren't playing the same game. It's not even fair to compete. That's like saying, man, I just got 3 tic-tac-toes in a row. Checkmate. You know, like, this is not,
dude, I saw this all the time during the PPTQs, where people are like, how did this person win a PPTQ? I'm so much better than them. It's like, well, you played 1 PPTQ, and they played 14. So,
well, and also, if you are not at the tournament that someone else wins, them winning did not take anything from you. Like, other people's success is not versus you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. There is helpful competition and there's bad competition.
If that was true, then nobody should play Smash Melee anymore, because you just should not even try against Mango at this point.
You should definitely try against Mango. I think.
Or sorry, I meant HBox. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, here's the crazy part, though, right? We talked about that, and yet HBox has had more losses this year than he has the 4 years before this combined.
Yeah, I know, but he just won a tournament this weekend.
Sure, but still, but that doesn't. That shouldn't mean you should stop competing if you want to compete, right? What I'm saying is, right, is like it can be a good motivator or it can be a bad, depending on how you look at it.
Sure.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, if you chose to compare your success, it's funny that we do that at a small scale, right? So like a really good example is like if any human being on the planet at this point in the last 10 years was like, if I'm not as good as PV, I'm not going to play Magic. It'd be like, what are you talking about? Like why is this a comparison you want to make? And what is the difference between that comparison and anyone that you're not attending the same events, having the same preparation as? It's fine to compete against your friends, right, that you're playing with every day all the time. But like comparing yourself to somebody that you have no idea what their circumstances with is just really tough.
Well, let's talk about it in a way that's also relatable as well. You have to also then have realistic goal setting for yourself.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, one of the things you're touching on, right? Like, let's take it out of that realm of Magic for a second. But let's say that you are, not in shape, you're not working out or anything else. And you're like, I'm going to get in shape. And so then you decide that what you're going to do is you're going to start P90X tomorrow. And it's like, that's probably not a good plan. Like, that's not a real realistic path to get to what it is that you're trying to do, because you're going from like 0 to 100, right? And you're setting yourself up to fail. You're setting yourself up to reinforce negative things about yourself. And then you're just going to get into this situation. So same thing, like if your goal in Magic, you're like, my goal in Magic is to be the next Kai Buddha. It's like, that's probably not a realistic goal. Like you probably should set some intermediary goals somewhere along the way so that you can build towards something that what you're trying to do.
Also not an actionable goal, right?
Right, exactly.
Your goal is to, like, when you say my goal is to be the next Kai Buddha, what you're saying is I want to be the greatest. And then you're like, okay, what does that mean? Right? Like, if your goal is actually to be like a great like Kai, shouldn't your goal be to like improve at Magic and like learn things at like a step-by-step process or whatever? And like if your goal is maybe, let's say, to get recognition from others, maybe the way to do that isn't to like spike a tournament, but is to like learn these things and master these things, right? There are like other ways to get these sort of goals and figuring out and acting on them. And also, Trey kind of hinted this second, but being reasonable with your goals, right? My friend Daniel was driving up to GP Indy this past weekend. He was teaming with two people who he doesn't really know, and he was kind of just going to have fun and see his good friend Jeremy. Jeremy's a great guy, and he went to go hang out with Jeremy, and he was like, I might as well play his event while I'm up there, right? And he called me on his way up, and he's like, Mason, I don't know if I should play Death Shadow or Urza. Right. And I'm like, well, don't you want to play Urza a bunch? And he's like, yeah, but like, I don't want to be the guy on the team that doesn't let them down or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, man, your goal is to like improve at Magic and get better. Don't like, quote, handicap yourself by picking a deck that you think you can play better. Not even by that much, trying to like ask him to be honest about it, instead of losing out on this experience with Urza that could be super beneficial for you in the future. Right. I get if like there are other factors that could lead to picking that deck over Urza, but Urza is like the best deck. You should play this deck. You should do this. And I talked to him on Sunday when he got back, and he's like, I'm so glad I played Urza for like all these reasons. I learned this, I learned that. And he could have lost out on those opportunities.
I think that the last point that we should cover before we kind of move on from the topic overall is, those things that you can do to overcome these problems, right? Like the team perspective is like a really good example of this, where they're like, I don't want to let my team down, and I have this external factor that's like contributing to how I'm feeling in Magic. And I think that taking opportunities to improve is the best way to improve. There's an opportunity in front of you. What are you going to do to take advantage of that? And I think that if you're going to overcome self-doubt, it's to look at like, why am I having self-doubt in this moment, and what can I do to beat it? And like grasping onto that and saying, well, okay, so here's why I'm thinking this. Let's either remove that or let's poke holes in it. It's one of the two, right? Either it's complete nonsense, or I need to chip away at it and figure out why it's happening. And once you do that, I think that you become more, one, self-aware of what's happening to you specifically, because it's your self-doubt you're trying to overcome, and then two, you're also, becoming more aware of of how you can improve and how you can do better. Trey, you had something to say there.
No, I think that's where it's at. It's a matter of like when you're having these feelings that are going on, is asking yourself not only that you're having them, but why you're having them. And I think that's one of the crucial questions that you're there. And that's one of the crucial points that you can get to of working your way to the other side of it.
Yeah, I think that, you guys were making such good points that I didn't want to go back to some of my specific examples. But, if we look at the Scapeshift thing, it was 100% like time considerations mixed with, caring too much about what other people think. If we look at, Pro Tour Origins for me and playing Green-Red when I wanted to play Blue-Black or Temur, it was 100% just like, this is the deck that's doing the best in testing, even if I don't even if I think these decks are better, I should just do this thing because my teammates will think less of me for doing something else. And I think that as somebody who lets, I mean, it sounds like you don't have this problem as much as I do, but as somebody who lets external factors impact them in such a huge way, having those moments of self-analysis are really important for me and breaking those down.
Yeah, and I think being honest, like you said, with like where it's coming from, why it's affecting me, and being honest with like, should this bother me? Should so and so top foiling the GP affect me? Right? Should this matter?
Did I miss some Twitter drama about this?
Yes.
All right.
And should like also like I had friends reach out and like talk to me saying like, I feel this way and it feels weird because it feels like a certain way with certain types of people and not with another. And I feel like they recognized that wasn't healthy and they wanted to talk through it. Yeah. So that's why it's so prevalent on my mind right now. It's because I just had this conversation 24 hours ago. So
yeah,
like,
well, super shout out to everybody that top forward SCG or GP Indy this weekend. All of them are respectable players and should be appreciated for their accomplishments.
I like a lot of those players in top 4. They're great people. So,
all right, I don't have anything else to say on this. Anything you guys want to say before we move on?
There was one thing I wanted to say because it kind of related to what I said earlier, but Trey kind of segued in with the perfect thing, and I didn't want to ruin it and derail it. But here we are at the end.
That's sweet of you to say.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Don't get too high in your britches. This is exactly what I was going to say, is that there are very few people who I would go as aggro on and attack them constantly as I would Trey McLarnon. It's because I know that Trey is my close friend. He likes competition, and he can take the hits and he'll throw them at me, and he drives value intrinsically. So if I sit here on the podcast and I tell Trey, just skip the legacy section of what we play, we already know what you're going to say, old man. He's going to play Sneak and Show. He loves Sneak and Show. He knows that like, I know, and he knows that's not going to affect him, and that's just us having a good time. It's you have to know when you're going to say these things to these people, which segues to when you're making jokes with people. Sometimes I have said things that have hurt my friends and affect them, and I didn't mean for it to. Spencer alluded to the snake guy thing, right? I did not mean for that to like affect him. I didn't realize it until he told me, and you have to be aware of those things. So I was just going to say, make sure that you're cognizant of how your actions affect others.
Yeah, and just know that if you want to make a joke about somebody, don't make it 17 times if they don't like
it. There's another thing that I want to say too that they can be helpful with the self-doubt thing as kind of a final point, is that one of the things that kind of triggers things for people is that they're like, I hear this a lot where they say, well, I just don't want to be wrong, or I don't want to let somebody down, or I don't want to ruin my opportunity. This is my chance to go do this thing and I don't want to ruin it. Like, let yourself off the hook a little bit. Like, say you get it wrong. Okay, you got it wrong. So what? Like, just move on to the next thing. Like, give yourself a little leeway to, like, if you are, none of us are ever going to be perfect. None of us are ever going to do those kinds of things. Like, don't beat yourself up about making those kind of situations, because then what'll happen is that the next time, if you're kind to yourself, then you're not going to have as much of that pressure of what the bad parts are going to be if it goes that way the next time.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think that I think that also we just have to be honest about like the things that motivate us, and at the same time the things that cause issues for ourselves. And like that self-reflection is going to be the thing that determines what actions you should take. Because no matter what somebody like, Mason's example of like Snake Eye is like a really good example of like that just shouldn't impact me at all. Whether or not Mason says it, whether or not it just doesn't matter. And like the fact that anyone, including myself, could let that impact me is like, why? I think that some of it has to do with like, sorry, I'm thinking. I think that the thing that we have to realize is that, you're in control of your own motivators, your own things, and being honest with yourself will help you determine whether you have the right motivators. Mason and Trey, and I think, did a good job of talking about realistic goals and realistic things that you're expecting of yourself. And if you're honest about the things that are impacting you, it's going to be a lot easier to overcome the things that are impacting you negatively. because you're going to be able to say, well, this is the thing that's important to me, so why does this thing matter? Why does this person saying this matter? Why does this result matter? Why does this card choice matter? Why does this sideboard plan matter? And if you're honest about it, I think that we'll often find that our ultimate goals will lead us to the right choices for us. And that's the ultimate goal in all of Magic, is improving and, being the best that you can be in this game that you love so much. So, all right. Well, you can find me at Spencer13H. You can find Mason at Mason E. Clark. You can find Trey at TreyMC. You can find our sponsor Oasis at Oasis Games SLC. And you can find the podcast at CCMTG. You can support us on patreon.com/CCMTG. And you can buy swag at constructorism.com/swag, baby. Mason, do you got a CCMTG shirt?
I have a Oasis Games shirt.
You don't have a CCMTG shirt?
I have an Oasis Games one, though.
Well, I know.
You go to OasisGames.com and order your own Oasis Games shirt. Get it with your cards at Total Health.
I don't know if they sell shirts on the website.
That's just a mistake.
But I'll make sure to get you and Trey some CCMDG shirts here in the next couple of weeks. But if you wanted to get them yourself, you can go to constructorism.swag or .com/swag. Swag plug. Trey, what are you playing right now?
In Legacy, I'm playing. No, Mason sent me a hidden stockpile list, so my life is ruined. So what I'm playing is going to be trying to figure out whether or not this deck is actually good, and wasting far too much of my time tuning a deck that I probably should not be spending my time playing.
You want some spoilers?
So that, huh?
Spoilers about the deck.
It has hidden stockpile in it, which is about all I need to know.
How can Wrenn and 6 ever beat that many X1s?
yeah, that's the way you attack it, right? Yeah. Overload them. Oh, you can kill one a turn? Great. That's cute. I have so many.
Now we're getting to the meat of the potatoes.
Yeah.
What about standard? You doing anything to grind arena right now?
I'm not particularly. I'm kind of getting excited for Eldraine and trying to focus on that and thinking about that. When I've been firing up arena, I've still been scape shifting on some people.
Sure.
It's much harder to do now than it was, but the deck's still quite good.
It's still the best deck. Like, I know that Kethis is happening, but I think.
And then with Modern, Urza, but I played a couple leagues with Dredge this week, playing the Stitcher Supplier and Memory Sluice combo that we talked about on the show last week. I did like that a lot. I found that I was able to trigger that for the Conspire cost quite often in the early turns, and was having a lot of success with it.
Yeah, for me in Legacy right now, I would play a Lance deck. I'm not sure the 75 that I would play. I don't know if I get a chance to play Legacy this week, but if I do, I'll post a list in the Constructed Critics group. I'm back on Scape Shift. I got to play Jund and a couple of Stoneforge decks. Play a lot of green-white with Matt. With Druid combo. Yeah, I played quite a few hours of that deck. That deck's really good, and has a good Scape Shift matchup. But I think that Scape Shift right now is one of the better decks in Modern, and if it's going to be in that position, I think it's irresponsible of me not to play it at this point. And then in Standard, if you're trying to grind right now, I think you should be playing Mono Red with 3-mana Chandra and with Scorch Spitter. I think the deck is gas, and I don't know what the right 3-drop, 4-drop combination is, but I think it might not even matter. I think that you can make yourself have a pretty good Scape Shift matchup now, and you are one of the few decks that has enough, to combat something like Kethis, as long as they don't draw too many of their gain life removal spell.
Oath of Kaya.
Yeah. Mason?
I guess since we're going in this order, Legacy, I would play Temur Delver. I tried playing 4-color Delver a couple times on the podcast. I talked about wanting to play 4-color, and I have played it some since then, and I have just not been winning at all. And then I played Temur, and I win a lot, and I can't quite figure out if it's like a fundamental approach thing or the slight mana has just caught me in bad variants. But as of right now, I'm on Tima with no Hex Drinkers. I got Arcanist, Goyf, and Wrenn on the 3/3/3. So that's where I'm at with that. In Modern, I think it is currently irresponsible for me to say to play anything besides Urza, but I still will. Now that I've given that preference, I'm going to play Amulet Titan at an IQ this weekend. It's gonna be fun.
I think Amulet's in a really good position. I played against the deck twice this week. Both times I played against it, I thought one of the times my opponents played really badly, should have won that game by a lot, and the other time I got crushed. So
yeah, I think the deck's quite good right now, and I think you can do some stuff to speed bump Urza enough that as long as they don't like assemble infinite combo, you can generally beat what they're doing. And you have, I think that matchup also matters a lot on how well the Urza opponent knows Amulet, which is a thing that happens sometimes in these matchups. So I think that's a moment where if I put my time in versus Urza, I should be proficient enough to do well at IQ with it. And then I still like that green-white deck we talked about last week on the show. I think there's something there. I just don't quite have the time for it. Also, I thought of a weird one last night with Devoted Druid combo with Karn in the deck.
I also thought about that a couple days ago. The problem that I have, so there's a lot of things I like about Devoted Druid combo, and it's like a deck that now I think that I could play at a tournament because of my experience with Matt. But I'd like to talk about Amulet Titan for a second if we can, because
let's go.
I think that when I like Titan Shift, I often also like Amulet. I literally text Mason this week about, doing a stream together where he teaches me Amulet Titan. Matt told me it's a bad idea, but I think I'll probably make it happen here in the next couple weeks, because I think I need to learn that deck as a Primeval Titan aficionado. It's just time for me to buckle down and learn to untap my lands.
Yeah, I mean, I love playing Amulet Titan.
I think that like you have a good Titan Shift matchup with Amulet, and while your other matchups skew, if Titan Shift is good, it usually means that Amulet Titan is good.
Yeah, I go very fast and it's going over the top people is good. I'm quite good at that, and I can play these other game plans too. And that's one of the cool things with the deck too, is like you can play things like Hiveline, you can play things like Trickemay Package, you can play things like Golos, you can do a lot of different things as a way to attack people. So a lot of cool stuff there. And then in standard, I would play Kethis combo. And if you're playing the standard new thingy to get experience, I'd play Gates or Mono Red.
Yeah, Gates seems broken in that.
It's been quite good so far. So
all right, well, thank you everybody so much for listening, and we'll talk to everybody next week with another episode of Constructed Criticism.